Have you ever noticed how the people who seem to get really good at something don't just learn once and move on? They loop. They learn, apply, reflect, and repeat over and over until mastery feels effortless. Welcome back to The Long Game. I'm Nathan. And before we begin, I just want to say thank you. Really. I read every single comment you leave, and even if I can't always reply, between work, family, and raising little ones, please know I truly appreciate you being here. You're the reason this show keeps growing, one thoughtful listener at a time. Now, let's talk about learning loops. Because success, real success, doesn't come from what we know. It comes from how fast we can learn, and how often we're willing to loop back, re-examine, and improve. Think of life as an infinite classroom. There are no grades, no final exams, no graduation day, just loops. Each loop, a cycle of action, feedback, and reflection. We do something, it works or it doesn't, and then we adjust. That's the loop. That's learning. But here's the quiet truth. Most people don't loop long enough. They stop after the first few cycles, when the excitement fades or the results take too long. They think the feedback means failure, when really it's data. Every mistake, every awkward attempt, every little embarrassment, that's not proof that you're bad at something. It's evidence that you're learning. Imagine a child learning to walk. They fall dozens of times before they take their first step. And yet no one ever tells them, maybe walking isn't for you. They just get up and loop again. Try, fall, adjust. That's how all mastery begins, through repetition, not talent. Adults forget that. We avoid the loop because it feels slow, humbling, uncertain. We prefer knowing to learning, but the truth is, knowing doesn't compound. Learning does. The greatest investors, the best athletes, the most creative thinkers all share the same mindset. They live inside their learning loops. They treat life like a simulation, test small, learn fast, repeat endlessly. That's why they evolve, while others stagnate. You see, feedback is the mirror that reality holds up, and looping is how we polish it. Every cycle makes the image clearer. Who we are, what works, what doesn't, what we need to change. That's the real compounding engine behind growth. So, if you're feeling stuck, like progress has slowed or results have plateaued, don't quit the loop. Zoom out. Ask, what did this cycle teach me? What pattern is emerging that I wasn't seeing before? And most importantly, what can I do next that's just 1% better? Because that's how loops work. Tiny adjustments repeated relentlessly. They don't look like progress day to day, but over months, years, even decades, they build unstoppable momentum. In this episode, we'll explore how these loops appear in every domain, from learning skills to investing wisely, from improving relationships to mastering focus. We'll look at how the best people in the world engineer their feedback loops intentionally, not by luck, but by design. And we'll uncover one mindset shift that turns every frustration into fuel, by seeing mistakes not as setbacks, but as signals. So stay with me. We're going to dive into the rhythm of real growth, not the glamorous kind, but the grounded, iterative kind. Because once you learn to love the loop, you stop fearing the learning curve. You start embracing it as the path itself. I'm Nathan, and this is The Long Game. Let's begin our first loop together. When we talk about learning loops,
It can sound abstract, like something motivational speakers say to sound deep. But underneath the phrase lies something incredibly practical, something that scientists, athletes, and long-term investors all use, even if they call it by different names. A learning loop is simply this: act, get feedback, adjust, repeat. That's it. But those 4 steps, done over time, are what separate amateurs from masters. Let's break it down. First comes action. You can't learn from theory alone. No amount of reading about swimming teaches you to float. At some point, you have to jump into the pool. The loop begins the moment you act, because only action produces feedback that's real. Next comes feedback. It's the hardest part for most people, because feedback isn't always pleasant. It often arrives disguised as rejection, failure, or criticism. But if you can train yourself to detach your ego from the feedback, to see it not as judgment, but as information, you unlock the real power of growth. Think of it like tuning a musical instrument. If the sound is off, you don't get angry at the strings. You listen carefully, adjust the tension, test again. Every sound is feedback. Every adjustment brings you closer to harmony. That's how a learner should see life. Then comes adjustment, the quiet genius of the loop. It's where learning turns into strategy. You take what the feedback revealed and change your approach, just a little, 1 degree at a time. That small shift compounds. It's how people refine their craft without burning out. And finally, you repeat. Because 1 loop means nothing. Real change happens when you stack hundreds, maybe thousands of loops, like layers of paint forming a masterpiece, or like compound interest growing from patient reinvestment. The truth is, the best learners aren't necessarily the smartest. They're simply the ones who loop the fastest. They compress the distance between doing and learning. Instead of waiting months to reflect, they reflect daily, even hourly. They treat every day as a micro-experiment. Did this work? What didn't? What can I tweak tomorrow? And here's the beautiful part. Loops work at every scale. You can use them to learn a new language, to build a business, to improve communication with your partner, even to parent better. Each situation gives you feedback, and if you listen, you improve. Let's take an example from investing, something many listeners here appreciate. An investor runs on learning loops too. They study, form a thesis, invest small, observe how the market responds, reflect on what their assumptions missed, and adjust their framework for the next cycle. That's not gambling. That's looping intelligently. Same with creative work. Writers, musicians, or entrepreneurs, they create, publish, get feedback from the world, and refine their taste and timing. Every draft, every version, every iteration is another loop. The faster and calmer they go through it, the sharper they become. You see, what kills progress isn't a lack of knowledge. It's emotional resistance to feedback. We take it personally. We feel embarrassed by how rough the first attempt looks. But perfection isn't a starting point. It's the result of loops. Even Picasso had sketches no one ever saw. Even Beethoven rewrote entire sections before he called it music. The question isn't, how talented are you? The question is, how willing are you to loop? Because looping requires humility. It means saying, I might be wrong, and that's okay. It means staying curious long after the excitement fades. And in a world obsessed with instant validation, that humility becomes a competitive advantage. You can think of it like compound learning interest. Every time you loop, act, get feedback, adjust, you add a small unit to your base of understanding. And over months, that base compounds into insight. That's why someone who learns intentionally for 3 years can surpass someone who's been repeating the same mistakes for 30. The first person loops. The second one just circles. And here's a gentle reminder. Loops aren't about speed, they're about direction. If you loop but don't reflect, you just spin in place. But if you reflect deeply, even slow loops move you far. It's not about doing more, it's about learning more from what you do. So maybe tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, what loop did I complete today? What did life try to teach me that I almost missed? Because the people who keep growing, quietly, consistently, are the ones who keep asking that question. In the next part, we'll go one level deeper. We'll explore how to design your learning loops so that they become self-reinforcing, so that learning itself becomes addictive, and progress becomes inevitable. Because once your loops start to feed on each other, you no longer need motivation. You'll have momentum. I'm Nathan, and you're listening to The Long Game. See you in part 3.
If you've ever watched someone who seems to improve endlessly, year after year, without burning out, you're watching a person who has engineered their learning loops. They're not just learning by accident. They've built a system that feeds on itself, a self-reinforcing cycle where each small win fuels the next one. That's the real secret. Success doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows in spirals, tightening, sharpening, compounding with every loop. And once that system locks in, it almost runs on autopilot. So how do you build that kind of loop for yourself? Let's start with the first principle. Make feedback frictionless. If you want your loops to spin faster, you need to shorten the distance between action and insight. That means building habits where feedback arrives quickly, clearly, and without ego. For example, if you're learning to write, publish short pieces often. Let the world respond. If you're improving your leadership, ask your team for candid feedback every month, not once a year. If you're an investor, keep a decision journal. Record why you made each choice, so when results come, you can separate skill from luck. The goal isn't to be right all the time. It's to close the feedback loop faster than others. Because speed of feedback determines speed of learning, and speed of learning determines depth of mastery. The second design rule is celebrate iteration, not perfection. Most people stop looping because they want the next version to be the one. But perfection is just iteration that hasn't looped enough. Instead of chasing the flawless outcome, fall in love with the next draft, the next test, the next try. Each one is progress disguised as imperfection. You can see this mindset everywhere among top performers. Athletes replay footage after every game. Coders run small builds daily instead of waiting months for the big release. Artists sketch constantly, knowing 99 sketches might lead to one masterpiece. They don't worship perfection, they worship the process. Third, anchor the loop to identity, not motivation. Motivation fades,
Identity stays. When you see yourself as someone who learns, you'll keep looping even when no one's watching. It's no longer about achieving a goal. It's about living your nature. Say you're learning guitar. If your goal is to play one song, you'll probably quit once you can strum it decently. But if your identity is, I'm a guitarist, you'll practice because that's just what guitarists do. The loop becomes part of who you are, not something you push yourself to maintain. And that leads us to the fourth principle, compound reflection. This is where loops turn into wisdom. It's not enough to just collect feedback. You have to connect the dots between loops. Once in a while, zoom out. Look at 6 months, a year, or 5 years of loops. Ask, what themes keep showing up? What truths have I earned through repetition? That meta-learning, learning about your own learning, is where deep growth happens. It's how patterns reveal themselves. It's how small daily cycles evolve into life philosophies. Let me give you a quiet example. A craftsman spends 30 years carving wood. Each piece teaches him something small: how light hits the grain, how certain woods respond to humidity. At first, those details feel trivial, but after decades of loops, he doesn't just know how to carve. He feels it. His hands know truths that can't be written in a manual. That's wisdom, the final form of learning loops. And here's something subtle but powerful. When your loops are designed well, they start generating emotional momentum. You begin to enjoy learning because the process itself becomes rewarding. Every feedback sting turns into curiosity. Every failure becomes fuel. And every reflection becomes a small celebration, not because you've arrived, but because you can see how far the loops have taken you. When that shift happens, you no longer fear the long road. You realize the long road is the game, that every loop, however messy, however uncertain, is another turn of the wheel toward mastery and meaning. So maybe tonight, instead of asking, "Am I successful yet?" ask something better. Am I looping well? Because if you are, success is just a delayed reflection of your learning curve. It's already on its way. To everyone listening, thank you for spending your time here, looping with me. This channel keeps growing because of your support, your comments, your quiet curiosity. I read them all, even when life with little ones keeps my hands full. And it means more than you know. Keep looping. Keep learning. Keep compounding. I'm Nathan, and this has been The Long Game. Until next time, stay patient. Stay in the loop.